We run out of reserves in about 4 weeks. You know, there are reserves all over the world, and we would really run out.
Did Trump just admit the world was down to only 4 weeks of oil reserves, raising fears of how close the system really came to breaking? Was the U.S. forced to act fast as Trump suggested supplies were nearing exhaustion, leaving no room for delay in the Iran crisis? And with the Strait of Hormuz at the center of the tension, could global oil flows have really stopped almost overnight if the situation escalated further? Before the Iran deal was reached, U.S. President Donald Trump acknowledged that global oil reserves were nearly exhausted. He said the situation was becoming increasingly critical at the international level. Speaking at the G7 summit, Trump warned that the world could face potential bedlam if oil supplies completely ran out. He stressed that such a shortage could trigger widespread instability across global markets. Trump also claimed that global reserves were at risk of being depleted within just 4 weeks if no deal was finalized. He said urgent action was necessary to prevent a major global energy crisis.
We run out of reserves in about 4 weeks. You know, there are reserves all over the world, and we would really run out, and there'll be a time when you wouldn't be able to get it. And you want to see bedlam? So for all those so-called geniuses that want to show me how smart they are, ask them why didn't they blow up General Soleimani. Ask that of the general and a couple of other people that I like very much, but boy, are they wrong.
Trump said that continued military strikes would have kept the Hormuz Strait closed to commercial shipping. He warned that escalation would have blocked one of the world's most important trade routes. He added that without the agreement, oil tankers would have stopped moving through this strategic waterway. He suggested that global energy flows would have been severely disrupted. The Hormuz Strait handles around 1/5 of global oil consumption through maritime trade routes. It remains one of the most critical choke points for international energy supply. The International Energy Agency had also warned that only weeks of commercial oil inventories were left at the time. It highlighted the risk of a rapid global supply shortage. U.S. President Donald Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian have formally signed the Memorandum of Understanding. The 14-point agreement is designed to end hostilities between the two countries and reopen the Strait of Hormuz to normal navigation. The memorandum establishes a 60-day ceasefire period during which both sides will pursue negotiations on a broader final agreement. Trump signed the document during a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris on June 18th. Meanwhile, President Pezeshkian signed the memorandum in Iran, completing the process from Tehran's side. The agreement begins with a region-wide ceasefire, aiming to halt hostilities and lay the groundwork for a permanent end to the conflict. Both sides have pledged to respect each other's sovereignty and avoid interference in internal affairs, signaling a shift toward de-escalation. Washington and Tehran have set a 60-day deadline to negotiate a broader final agreement, with an option to extend talks if needed. The United States has agreed to begin lifting its naval blockade, while Iran will gradually restore normal shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has agreed to ensure free and safe passage for commercial vessels traveling between the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman for a limited period of 60 days. The memorandum outlines plans for a massive $300 billion economic development initiative aimed at supporting Iran's recovery. The United States has agreed in principle to discuss sanctions relief as part of a broader and mutually accepted final settlement. Iran has reaffirmed that it will not pursue nuclear weapons, while both sides work on a framework for managing enriched uranium. Until a final agreement is reached, Iran will maintain its current nuclear activities and the US will avoid new sanctions or military deployments. The agreement allows for sanctions waivers that could enable Iranian oil exports and related financial services to resume. Both sides will explore pathways toward financial normalization, including discussions on frozen assets and economic access. Once initial commitments are implemented, negotiations will expand to address all remaining issues required for a lasting settlement. Progress toward a final agreement will depend on both sides demonstrating compliance with ceasefire and maritime obligations. Any final agreement is expected to be submitted to the United Nations Security Council for international legal backing and enforcement. The release of the US-Iran memorandum has triggered a fierce battle over who emerged victorious from the negotiations. While Washington portrays the agreement as a framework tied to Iranian compliance, Tehran is presenting it as a major diplomatic win. Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf says the deal reflects what he calls a failure of US pressure on Iran. Galibaf argues that history will judge the agreement as evidence that Washington failed to impose its demands on Tehran. Iran's parliament speaker also claims the memorandum includes provisions for roughly $300 billion in future investment for Iran. Mohammad Bagher Galibaf said, and I quote, "The other side is not willing to accept that it was the aggressor, because in that case it would have to pay all damages." Instead of paying compensation, the text emphasizes concepts such as reconstruction and economic development. Within this framework, $300 billion in investment has been envisaged, part of which will be allocated to reconstruction and compensation for damages, unquote. The claim fueled speculation that Tehran had secured major economic benefits in exchange for joining the agreement. However, US officials quickly pushed back against that interpretation, insisting the deal's benefits remain tied to strict conditions and compliance requirements. Senior US officials insist the memorandum does not authorize any immediate payments to Iran. According to Washington, the agreement contains no requirement for cash transfers, grants, or direct financial assistance. Officials say the reported $300 billion figure refers to potential private and foreign investment that could materialize if Iran complies with the deal. They stress that any economic relief would depend on verified progress toward a broader and final agreement. US officials also emphasize that sanctions relief will remain directly linked to Iranian nuclear concessions and continued compliance. Washington has also rejected claims that frozen Iranian assets would be automatically released under the agreement. US officials say Tehran sought immediate access to restricted funds during the negotiations. However, they insist the final text makes clear that no funds would be unlocked simply because the deal was signed. According to Washington, the release of frozen assets would depend on what it calls demonstrable Iranian compliance. Officials say certain funds could become available in the future, but only if Iran fulfills specific obligations under the agreement. Iran's parliament speaker says Tehran plans to introduce shipping fees in the Strait of Hormuz once the 60-day transition period ends. Galibaf says the fee-free arrangement outlined in the memorandum was never intended to remain in place indefinitely. Mohammad Bagher Galibaf said, and I quote, "Strait of Hormuz will not return to pre-war conditions. Iran has the right to sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, and of course we will receive a fee for services," unquote.
During the war, I wrote in a tweet that the Strait of Hormuz would never go back to the way it was before, and I still hold that view today. That does not mean, however, that we intend to disregard international law or establish rules of navigation. On the contrary, our actions will remain fully within the bounds of international law.